Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Betsy Brick, the Development Director of Early Music Seattle, and your host for another episode of Creative Conversations, where Early Music Seattle goes behind the scenes and sometimes into the living rooms to talk with artists who are a part of our 2021 season. And so tonight I am thrilled to be being able to visit with our own music director, Alex Weimann, the artistic director and founder of Whim W'Him contemporary dance company, Olivier Wevers, and a principal dancer with Whim W'Him, Jim Kent. So this evening, we're going to be exploring a unique collaboration that happened between the Seattle Baroque Orchestra and Whim W'Him Dance Company back in April of 2019 that paired modern dance with the Baroque music of Pergolesi's Stabat Mater. And a recording of this concert is going to be broadcast this Saturday at 7 o'clock on our website, earlymusicseattle.org. And it's a free concert, but if you feel inspired and moved by what you see and would like to support programming of this kind, that is always appreciated by us. So Alex, as many of you know, has been the music director of Seattle Baroque Orchestra since 2015. What you may not know is that he was born in Munich, where he studied organ, church music, musicology, theater, medieval Latin, and jazz piano. Welcome back to our program, Alex.
Thank you for having me.
And Olivier is originally from Brussels, Belgium. And in 2012, he was honored with the City of Seattle Mayor's Arts Award. And in 2011 and 2010, he took home the Grand Prize Award at the annual Dance Under the Stars Choreography Festival in California. And before founding Whim W'Him in 2009, he was a principal dancer at Pacific Northwest Ballet. Great to have you with us, Olivier.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Of course. And finally, Jim is originally from Minnesota and Hawaii and currently in his 11th season with Whim W'Him. He grew up playing classical violin and piano and holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Dance from Cornish College of the Arts and has toured both nationally and internationally. So welcome, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Betsy.
Sure. So before we all jump in, for those of you in our audience joining us live tonight, there will be time at the end of our program for Q&A. So feel free to type any questions that you have that you would like to ask our artists into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And later in our program, I will go ahead and take a look at those and ask them to our artists. All right, gentlemen, let's jump in and explore this innovative collaboration that we all did and see where this takes us. So first of all, how did this artistic partnership happen? What inspiration led to this creative adventure in the first place? So anyone who would like to jump in and answer that.
Um, Alex, I mean, it was really us meeting.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe I can start and try to be brief. To do something with music, Baroque music, of course, for the Seattle Baroque Orchestra and dance has been on my list for a long time. And I think it started with Gus Denhardt from Early Music Seattle pointing out a video to me that he received of Pergolesi's Stabat Mater done by a group of dancers and singers. And while I had never thought of that piece before, I thought this is a fantastic idea. I didn't like that particular video very much, but I thought this is wonderful. Let's do this, and let's find a group of dancers in town that we could work with. And I'm not so familiar with the Seattle dance scene, so I asked for a little bit of advice and was pointed, among others, to Whim W'Him and was fascinated by what I saw and immediately attracted. So I asked for a meeting with Olivier, and that's where we took it from. So from my side, the inspiration was the desire to do something with dancers, live music and dancers, and finding this piece, which perhaps we can talk about that later, I think is wonderful for a project like this. And then the third link for me was to find the right choreographer and group of dancers to work with. And once that was done, I felt ready to go.
Wonderful. Olivier, what intrigued you about this potential partnership?
Well, I mean, when do you get a chance to like actually have dance done with live music? It doesn't happen often. We use a lot of recorded music just because financially that's more approachable. So I was totally intrigued, and I knew Gus, and Gus reached out, and he was like, "Alex wants to meet with you." And I met Alex at the church where you were rehearsing for another concert a year before or something, during one of your breaks. And right away, it was charmed and intrigued, and we right away kind of connected with the ideas about the piece and the project and how it could happen.
Okay. And Jim, what were your overall impressions of um, of what were the overall impressions of the dancers when Olivier presented this concept of creating a modern dance program for Pergolesi's Stabat Mater? Had any of you ever danced to music like this before? I'm curious.
Well, first of all, I'm really happy that he cast me. We have 7 people in the company, and it was a quartet. So I think that in the beginning of the process, Olivier explained what was happening with this collaboration. We just started at the beginning. He played the first track for us, and we just listened. And I was struck by the richness of the music, the development as it went on, and the episodes of each section. So I was really excited to create something new, knowing Olivier's work and knowing his sort of aesthetic and what he can do with movement and the body and partnering. I was immediately on board. I thought it was going to be really successful collaboration.
So let's talk about some of the artistic decisions that went into this production, because there were quite a few, if I remember correctly. So, Olivier, how did the subject matter of Stabat Mater speak to you as a choreographer? And what is it about this piece that naturally lent itself to expression through modern dance?
Well, it's mostly the appeal. I love classical music. I love Baroque music. It's very ancient music, and I think some people have to be really in love with it to understand it. What was appealing to me is like really bringing the essence of the story and the narrative that's in there to like a contemporary presence. The music is ingrained in that sacred sensement of it. And I really wanted to, how can we bring this and make this music more relevant? How can we get more people to hear this music, listen to the music and fall in love with this music? So the story is very religious, and I wanted to find a way to make it more universal. So that it's a very famous story, and it's very sacred for some people. And I thought, is there a way to make it appealing to more people? Does it have to be so religious, or can it also really be about a relationship of a mother and her son and losing that son? And I think the narrative in the music, in the words, offers a window into that possibility, rather than just being really focused on that religious story. It can also, because the way the poems are structured, I think the first 6 poems are really strictly narrative about what happened at the cross, and then the next 6 numbers of the compositions are really more about emotions and overall feelings. And so I think just to have that, it already offers an opportunity for us to explore more of the feelings and the emotions of the story rather than just a narrative. And that was really intriguing to me. And of course, I love finding ways to use classical music and use contemporary dance to really kind of, the contrast to me is really appealing. And it's not that it's a contrast, it's just something we haven't seen. So it's like, how can we push that? And how can we bring movement that maybe is not seen as acceptable for classical music? How can we bring that in? How can we challenge ourselves to see something new into this music?
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So I believe we have a trailer to show that you all put together that will give the audience a taste tonight of what they will get to savor over the weekend. And so let's go ahead and share that now, and I'll follow up with a question that can kind of explore that a little bit. Okay, so Alex and Olivier, how were you able to blend the stories and emotions being expressed in this piece musically with the stories and emotions being conveyed by the individual dancers that we sort of just saw an example of in the trailer? And how did this beautiful synergy that we just glimpsed emerged, and what made it successful, in your opinion? So either one of you can go ahead and answer that.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions. Maybe Olivier, you can go ahead and answer the one that applies to the dancers and the stories that are told.
Yeah, I think, just with that idea, like I mentioned, that the composition is like six numbers about a narrative, and then six about more of the emotional journey of the mother looking at her son. I definitely didn't want to make something that was very literal, but I used it as a inspiration. So at some point, each of the dancers were really representative of a character, either the Virgin Mary and the Christ and God and the Holy Spirit. Those were kind of four characters that we used throughout the productions. But also at times they don't represent that at all. And it's really more about the emotions that their dancing can portray. And how can that relate to the narrative of his mother losing her son in this way?
Okay, great. And Alex, did you want to add something as far as, musically, how the story was told so that it blended with this portrayal that the dancers had of the emotions and the story being expressed?
I think we'll get perhaps a little later to what we as musicians learned out of working with dancers. So I will answer that question a little later. But back to your slightly earlier question, how are the stories or this story told in the piece connected to the stories told by the dancers or the musicians? And that I can speak to, which is for me, watching the dancers rehearse was very enlightening, because in a way I felt like what we work on and what we aim for is a very similar thing. So while in music you would work on perhaps pitch to get a gesture clearer or phrasing to make clear where the motion goes to. Also, the dancers would file and make their expressions more precise and therefore more expressive. So what I found in that work is that it's a very similar approach. And what we in music try to do is that that as musicians don't just reproduce a if you want choreography of notes or dynamics or gestures, but tell a story that's credible, that's plausible. I don't quite know how to put it in words, but if a dancer does something that comes from inside, so to speak, then you believe it and it touches you. If an actor just recites lines without feeling them, you won't be touched. So it's a similar thing in music, and I found very satisfying that the trajectory of our work is actually similar that way.
Yeah, yeah, that does sound like quite an amazing discovery to make. I would imagine there were others too that came about as you worked together.
Yeah, for me, one of the uh, enlightening or relevating experiences was uh, Olivier touched on that a little bit. The poem is about the Mother Mary standing at the cross and looking at her dying son or dead son. And while it's religious and even probably has some sort of place in some service, I wouldn't remember. Um, to me, the most important thing is that it's deeply human, and it's about the loss of your own child. So what nobody wishes to happen, and um, in this, as Olivier mentioned, 12 in those 12 verses, which are 12. Jim, I believe, used the word episodic. 12 uh, angles, 12 points of view at the same story. Um, some of them are not what you would expect in a piece of grief. Some of them are quite serene. Some of them are very peaceful, and some of them are even comic. And I have been knowing this piece for a long time, and I love it. But I have to admit, I had a hard time with those comic, light-hearted, almost operetta kind of arias in it, and they never seemed to make sense to me. But with Olivier's take on it and that amazing work of the company, um, I think I understood a little better what that could be, and it's I think I can use only a metaphor really to express it, but maybe some of you know that movie La Vita è Bella, The Life is Beautiful, with Roberto Benigni, about that guy in a concentration camp with his son, and he's about to be killed any day, but he plays to his son the story that this is something very funny. And even at the moment where he's brought to his execution, he actually plays tricks to alleviate the terror and the horror of the situation from his son. And it reminded me of something else that I recently saw on a news channel. It was about a guy in the Middle East who, whenever um, bombs detonate in his vicinity, he laughs with his daughter, and he pretends to her that it's a joke. And his reasoning was, well, when we die in that, at least I want her to die with a laugh, with a smile. And I know this is a little precarious because it's funny and tragic at the same time, but to me there is a very deep truth in replying with a comic or a serene or a peaceful mood to grief and to the despair that comes with it. It seems like one logic step, you know, besides anger and denial and what else comes there. So to integrate those seemingly strange arias and elements into it, the working with Olivier and this group was a tremendous help, and I'm really grateful because it gave me I think a more profound and more true understanding of the piece,
Yeah.
which I believe is nothing but religious in a way. It's more about opera and all of that than about the sacred context, though it's originated there.
Right, right, absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like it's sort of highlighting the absurdity of life in a way, and you know, because it is a mixture of light and dark, you know, sorrow and joy, and so, you know, being able to speak to all of that, it's like this piece really gets to the heart of that journey, that we're all on in some way or another. So absolutely. So Jim, what was the experience like for you dancing and coordinating the movements of your character, the Christ figure, to the varying tempos of Baroque music? Were there unique challenges that this presented to the dancers that you sort of had to work out as you were working with the choreography of this? And just curious from your perspective what it was like.
Definitely. Yeah, it was, as a, you know, front facing performer for this or any production, the order is really tall. You know, you're telling the story, you're executing the choreography, you have the right intentions, you're relating to each other and having sort of a not correct relationship, but a real relationship that's based on a directed intention. You're working with live music, which is a living, breathing thing. So there's so many different elements that could change your decision making. I mean, as characters, we all had our roles, but there's nothing I could do to be like, I'm Jesus, or, you know, there's nothing literal, as was said about the production. I think my job was really just to sort of honor the intentions and honor the essence of each specific episode through the choreography. So, you know, relating or the kind of touch that I would touch Mia, who played Mary, or I guess each episode, some would highlight one person or a few people, and then others would either be off stage or we would be on stage helping to support and lift up those that were highlighted. So it's kind of like disappearing when you are not highlighted and supporting and giving focus to those that are in order to tell the story. Also, just like tempo, honoring the music, honoring the tempo, and we rehearsed to recording, so there was a lot of sort of predictability that we could count on that was the same after a while, and we could make choices based on that. But dancing and performing with live music, it was a very different experience. It was a lot more live, and a lot of tempi were discussed to make it more executable as dancers. And, you know, stamina was another thing, because we are 4 people and a lot of us are on stage most of the time, but thankfully Olivier, as a former dancer himself, he organized it in a way that he considered our stamina levels, because that's a very real thing where if you're doing a lot for 2 sections in a row, he would think like, okay, maybe you need a break, you should go off stage. And he would plan for that or make you a supporting person. So stamina was a huge thing for sure. The other thing I'll say about stamina is energy level. So if let's say you were on stage for 2 of the sections and you just did a lot and 2 people came to join you, we sort of had to think and talk a lot about where we were coming from and what we were about to do, because the approach had to be really thought about and specific for us to be on the same level. And, you know, because we were coming from different experiences, so that sort of had to be seamless. in a way.
Yes. Yes, I could see that. Wow. That's a lot more that went into that than I would have thought watching all of you. That's really fascinating to hear about that process that had to be worked through to sort of have this translate this way on stage. So speaking of things translating on the stage, so one aspect of this performance that really set it apart was the inclusion of certain props like a bathtub, high heels, and rose petals to tell this story. So tell me a bit more about what went into these creative decisions, Olivier, as well as some of the costume choices that she made.
Uh, well, I love props. I love dancers dancing with unexpected props, right, Jim?
Absolutely.
And the idea, I mean, the bathtub came with the idea of, in the story, there's a moment when he gets cleansed. And so there's also the idea of the resurrection that's coming up. So there's an idea of transformation, of cleansing that's happening. So the bathtub is that idea, that metaphor that we bring into that.
Okay.
Putting Mia in heels represented a lot of things. They were really high heels, not very easy to
I remember
dance.
that.
But the conversation was also to represent the struggle of a mother. And, heels are really something that society takes for granted, but it's really torture for women to wear heels. It's not really humane. I mean, they shouldn't wear heels. It's just a thing for looks and fashion and glamour, but it's really painful.
Yes.
And so it was also representative of that pain. And I wanted to use that she feels that pain. And then even when she takes them off, there's that moment when actually the moment that she takes them off, Leanne is on the floor. Leanne is the one that removes them. And Leanne is on the floor just beating herself with the heels on the same rhythm than what Mia is doing with her feet on the floor. And he was really portraying that, even though she's not wearing the heel anymore, she's still beating herself up. So he was playing with those metaphors and the poetic way on how to represent those emotions, the suffering, the struggles. So he was really playing with that. The petals was like, I would have loved to have a fountain of water on stage, but how do you dance after that with water on the stage? So, but you can if you use petals, because also it will look beautiful when they fall down. And if there's a few on stage, it won't be too dangerous for the dancers. So there was a lot of technical issues with that, but also a visual poetry that wanted to be involved. And definitely the costumes too, being white, to being in black and representing the darkness and the light. And, her big dress, there was something about 50s, rock and roll kind of feel in there that was kind of appealing to me for that look. So it's playing with all those different ideas. It's like playing with words and being a poet with the visuals.
Absolutely. Just all these different layers of meaning that kind of were able to be enhanced, to enhance this story through the use of props and costumes and the portrayal of emotions through movement, just blending with the music. So yeah, that's really amazing to hear everything that kind of goes into a production like this that maybe someone in the audience may not really realize that this was what was involved. So I appreciate you kind of allowing us to peek behind the curtain a little bit with that. So Alex, how did the incorporation of modern dance change the way you presented this piece musically? And what opportunities did it offer you, the orchestra, and the singers artistically because of the way it needed to be presented?
Yeah. In some way, I answered that question already with what I said before. So that dimension that we could add made it easier to understand some of the profundity of the piece. So the piece as such is very multidimensional and very multifaceted, and it's not just all sad. It's really the full human range. And that's one of the reasons why I felt so comfortable with that piece and approaching Olivier with that piece, because it feels to me like it's bigger than music. It's bigger than just poetry. So uh, I don't even think we played or performed so much different, but it felt more sensible or more embedded in that way, that I believe a not just musical way of delivering that piece is more appropriate. It's a piece that screams, in my view, for either dance or dance is almost the most natural to me, but it asks for more than just being performed in a concert way. So I would say from a musical point of view, it felt like uh, that's where it belongs, the piece. It's like you're doing an opera in concert all the time until you do it on stage, and then you realize of course that's where it wants to live. And yeah, to me that was a similar experience. It felt like, wow, that makes much more sense than just doing it in a church and all sitting still and silent. To me, that there was a way more tangible and way more sensible at the same time realization of the piece.
Yeah. So this production was really a magnum opus that wove together music, singing, dancing, time, and space to create this beautiful tapestry of artistic expression and storytelling. So, what are the most important lessons you learned that made this collaboration successful? Because I'd imagine that there are collaborations that maybe you've both experienced that had challenges that were really, really difficult to overcome. And it seems as if this one, anything that presented itself, there was this ability to be able to move through it and innovate and, figure out how to work through those things. So what is it about the collaboration that you've had that you think offered this environment, this opportunity to do that?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is trust. I think Alex and I met. We had long conversations. We have and had great respect for one another's work, and I was not worried at all about what the music was going to sound like. And I think Alex totally gave me free rein about what I wanted to create. And we had conversation about how we could really, include the music and the dance together. I mean, for me, it was important also that the musicians would be on stage. It was not like a pit and a performance, but it was really about sharing the stage. I mean, we talked about having singers moving through the space also, and how much of that they could do. I wanted to push more, Um, so it was really, I think what made it successful is the trust that we had for one another, and then that belief that by bringing this together, it would work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would echo that. I was also thinking of words, and respect and trust are very high on that list, because yeah, it's a religious work, and both Olivier and I weren't interested in realizing something that's only for religious people or so. And but even for the artists involved, you need to ask yourself, how do I relate to all those questions? It's immaterial whether one is a believer or not. That's totally unimportant. But how you relate to those questions that are posed, that is important. And I remember those talks between Olivier and I, and how I felt shy in a way, talking about it, because I'm not interested what he believes in or not. But I'm of course interested in how he would approach that. And from the beginning, I felt the same respect. I mean, later then we found that we have even a similar upbringing religiously, regardless of where we stand now. But that may have made it easier. But it you're very right, Betsy. This is a risky thing to do, and it can go wrong. And it didn't at all. And that very open mind, with a lot of respect, I found then also in the work on stage from all the dancers and all the musicians. So it was something that carried on, and maybe that answers your question.
Yeah.
Why in my view it worked out beautifully and very not split in new and old, or in some sort of controversy, or a constructed antagonism or something. To me, it was one animal, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, from your perspective, what do you think made this successful?
Well, I want to echo exactly what they said. I think from my point of view, as a dancer, I trust Olivier as a creative director, choreographer, and as an outside eye giving feedback, but also hearing this body of work first, and then knowing sort of Olivier's history with classical music, and knowing what to do, knowing how much to do, not too much and not too little, what a piece of music needs. I think he's really keen on. It's one of his strengths. And so I could tell from the beginning, from their dynamic, I felt a sort of trust. So I could work on my own job as a performer on stage. And what Alex struck me, or what Alex said struck me as well, is the similar way in which creative people problem solve across all genres. It doesn't matter. It's sort of like looking at the subtlety, and when you're in that sort of like just before the show is going to open, you're rendering it out and fleshing it out, and details, and the nuance of examination was kind of the same sort of like level. And it felt nice that we were sort of like integrated in that way. Like, yes, the details, God is in the details.
Absolutely.
Really.
Absolutely. Well, we're at the point in our program where I would like to invite our audience tonight to ask any burning questions they may have that they would like to put to our artists. And you can do that by typing your question into the Q&A box, and I will go ahead and monitor that and be happy to ask those questions. So if you'd like to go ahead and do that now, I'd be very happy to talk to our artists about those. So I'll just watch this for just a moment and see if anybody is feeling
Yeah, I want to,
ready.
sorry if I can add about, what was important too when we were discussing this with Gus and Alex is, dance just like music composition too, takes a lot of time. It's not something that happens really fast. So it was also important for us, it took more than 4 weeks to create the whole work. And so it was also economically, how do we make this happen? How can we make this production happen without going over budget? And that's also why the decision of having only 4 dancers, but being able to have 4 weeks to really, actually 5 weeks, because we had the weeks of the performance to really prepare. So we had those 5 weeks to really prepare the work and work on it. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. So there are a couple questions that have come in. So what future, this is from Diana, what future collaborations are envisioned between Seattle Baroque Orchestra and Whim W'Him, I would imagine?
Well, we've had a few conversations, Alex, but the pandemic has kind of halted a lot of things right now, sadly.
Yeah, that's right. Olivier and I met because I would love to do the next one as soon as possible, and we talked about pieces because I was just curious to hear from him what he would be interested in, what kind of piece, whether it has words or not, whether it has singers or not, and he He gave me one. Maybe I shouldn't talk about it yet, even though I I think it would be a fantastic piece for us to. It would suit the orchestra very well
We're
too.
not holding you to it. I think you could share it with us. I don't think there's any harm in that if you're comfortable.
Yeah, yeah, it's the Bach double violin concerto,
Ah,
which I learned from Olivier. I believe is has been choreographed in the past, and it's a very sort of a classic, iconic kind of thing. But you should speak to that.
Yeah, it's a famous balancing piece. It's with two ballerinas that represent both of the violin. That's how we present that piece. It's a beautiful piece. I have danced on it before. I love the music, and it's one of those pieces that is so iconic by Balanchine that nobody's gonna touch it. But it's only inviting more interpretation. I mean, it's we only, diversity in all interpretation is what's beautiful in this world, and we need more of that. So,
yeah.
I would love to have, live music and being able to choreograph something on that for this music.
Well, we're going to just put that out to the universe right now. It's something to look forward to possibly in the future here. That's wonderful. So let me just see if there's any other questions that are coming in from anyone. Any more questions, anyone, before we close for the evening? Thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful to have everybody, and thank you all of my wonderful artists who joined us tonight. It's been great having some time to spend with you, and so everyone, please be sure to tune into the broadcast of this wonderful concert on Saturday at 7 p.m. And I just want to thank you all for joining us for another edition